Today I'm going to show you the best way to go about carb timing to get the best results possible. Hey, this is Colin DeWay. If you are new here and you want to master your metabolism and get in the best shape of your life, start now by subscribing today and click on that bell notification so you don't miss anything. Alright, let's not mess around today, let's get right into it, but make sure you stick around to the end of the video because I'm going to tell you how important carb timing is, when you should eat your carbs, how many carbs you should eat at each meal, and several factors that can determine what's best for you. So a lot is made up of carb timing and really meal timing in general. And there could definitely be some advantages into splitting up your carbs in a certain way, especially the leaner you get. In my opinion, the leaner you get and the lower your carbs get while dieting, the more important timing becomes. I mean, it only makes sense, right? The higher your carbs are, if you're well into a reverse diet or a building phase, your glycogen stores are already going to be filled, you're going to have lots of energy all the time, so timing doesn't matter as much. But when carbs are low, and therefore so are energy levels and glycogen stores, then there's some real benefit to timing your carbs in a way that helps you perform the best and get the most out of your carbs. We also have to factor in things like when in the day do you work out? How much do you like or dislike having food in your stomach when you work out? And when you tend to be the hungriest in the day. So like I'm always telling you, these are some general guidelines that I can and will give you, but there's a lot of individuality that comes into play and we always have to keep that in mind. Now before I give you a breakdown on when and how much to eat, let's talk about what's most important first. Your total macronutrient intake for the day far supersedes when you eat, and it's not even close. If you only pay attention to when you're eating your food, but you have no clue how much you're actually eating, you're really making things a lot more difficult on yourself. Do not major in the minor here. Just hitting your macros, regardless of when you actually eat them, is going to get you 90+% of the way there. So if you have no clue how much you're eating, start there before you stress out about when you should be eating. And there's one other important factor that's often ignored, but most definitely shouldn't be. Oftentimes we can look at things that would be most optimal, but then if we really struggle to actually follow the plan and we don't like what we're doing and we can't stick to it, it doesn't really matter. So if you find that you get triggered by struggling to stick to exact times and it causes you to kind of say screw it or go into F it mode and then you can't hit your macros, then it wouldn't be ideal to focus on timing. But if mentally it doesn't bother you and you can stick to this plan, what I'm about to tell you will help bring you to that next level. So I do want to give you some numbers to follow, but before I get into that, I want to talk about what are the most important times of day to focus on carbohydrate intake. And that would be coming in at number 1 is pre-workout, and then after that is post-workout, and then the third most important time is your first meal of the day. Pre-workout is number 1 because it's going to help fuel your workout and give you better performance. Better performance in the gym means better results. Post-workout is number 2 for a few reasons. 1 being it helps refill your glycogen stores. 2 being because nutrient uptake is improved post-workout. And 3 being there's potential for a small improvement in protein synthesis pairing carbs with protein. I personally consider pre and post-workout a very large step above all the rest, but I do put your first meal of the day as number 3 because you've just fasted overnight and some carbs can help fuel your day. Now the big addendum to this is when do you typically work out? For instance, if you work out early in the morning, then your first meal of the day not only is your first meal of the day, but it's also your pre-workout meal. However, some people have a really hard time eating food before a workout first thing in the morning, and if it makes you feel sluggish and slow and perform worse, then it wouldn't be ideal to have a big meal right before then. And while fasted workouts aren't typically ideal and not something I would generally suggest, if you find that you just perform better and feel better, then by all means that's fine, but now that means your pre-workout meal is actually technically the last meal of the day from the day before. But in this instance, now your post-workout meal becomes the most important meal of the day because you just trained, fasted, and you need to start the recovery process ASAP. While I do still think the post-workout meal is important, it is less important if you had a good pre-workout meal first. By the way, if you do work out fasted, now this is where protein post-workout becomes critical, but that's not something I'm going to talk about in this video, but make sure you are subscribed because I will be talking about protein timing on Wednesday. But there are still benefits of those carbs post-workout for all the reasons that I just gave before. Which, by the way, I do want to make a note about refilling glycogen stores post-workout. There is benefit of refilling glycogen stores post-workout, but understand that you're still going to refill them by the time you work out again the next time. Unless you're going to be working out the same muscle group later that day, then it doesn't really matter how fast you increase your glycogen stores. Now make sure you keep watching because I'm going to break down exactly how many carbs you should eat with each meal. meal. But first I want to remind you that this is much more important the leaner you are and the lower your carbs are in a dieting phase. As mentioned, in a building phase, carbs are already high and you're well fueled all the time. That doesn't mean there's no benefit in following this protocol, it just becomes less important. In fact, what might be a better strategy when carbs are high is just to split your intake up evenly between each meal. That way you don't end up with a huge abundance of carbs in one meal, which can not only be a problem in terms of being able to eat all the food that you need to eat, but also it makes it less likely for your body to store the glycogen that you get from it into your muscles instead of fat. Although when this does happen, or if you just prefer a big carbohydrate meal, you can take a glucose disposal agent such as Core Nutritional's Load, and that will help with shuttling the glucose to your muscles. Of course, full disclosure, I'm an affiliate with Core Nutritionals, and I do have a discount code in the description, but of course you don't have to take this GDA, and I don't care if you do or not, you can do any one that you like. I just really recommend Load. I always notice an improvement in digestion, and I maintain a better leanness while I take Load in a building phase. Anyway, let's get into how to break down your carbs for each meal of the day, starting with the most important ones I mentioned. Starting with your pre-workout meal, I recommend taking in about 25 to 30% of your daily carbs in this meal. If your first meal of the day is your pre-workout meal, then I recommend getting about 30 to 40% of your carbs in that meal if your stomach can handle it. I recommend taking your pre-workout meal about 1 to 2 hours before your workout so you don't deal with any stomach problems during your workout. However, if you find that you can do it sooner than that and it doesn't give you any problems and you like it, by all means, that's not a problem. The type of carb you eat here isn't of too much importance. However, I would recommend staying away from too much fiber pre-workout just to avoid any gastrointestinal stress during your workout. Plus, simple carbs are more readily available for energy. Now, when it comes to your post-workout meal, I recommend once again taking in about 25 to 30% of your total carbs for the day in that meal. However, it's less important than your pre-workout meal. Now, contrary to popular belief, you don't have to hit your post-workout meal as soon as the last weight hits the floor, but I do think it's a good idea to get it in as soon as you can. Do your best to get that meal in within an hour of your workout, 2 hours tops. By the way, a lot has been made of your post-workout carbs needing to be super fast digesting carbs, and I just don't buy into that. I do think it's a good idea to get some simple carbs in post-workout because insulin does have a small synergistic effect with protein, but it doesn't take a lot. And while faster digesting simple carbs will replenish glycogen stores faster, it doesn't do it better than complex carbs, and either way, the job will get done. So overall, don't worry too much about your type of carb post-workout. Now let's talk about the third most important meal of the day, the first meal. In this meal, I recommend getting about 15 to 20% of your carbs in if you can. And keep in mind too, personal preference definitely matters here. In fact, for me personally, once carbs get lower especially, I usually don't eat any carbs in my first meal. I'm very rarely hungry within the first few hours of waking, and I'm typically usually hungrier later in the evening, so I like to save some of that food for later in the day when I really want it the most. But if you're someone who wakes up really hungry, by all means eat more carbs earlier in the morning if you like. It's all about what you like and what you will stick to and what works best for you. I said it before and I'll keep saying it over and over again. Your total numbers for the day is what matters the most, no matter when you split it up, by far. And then of course, when you actually work out needs to be factored into the plan as well. For me, I typically work out mid-afternoon, so what I like to do is just eat my lunch as my pre-workout, and then my post-workout is just my dinner, and it just makes it really simple. But not everyone has that luxury, so you have to work out what works best for you and what works with your schedule and what you prefer. This isn't a right or wrong kind of thing. Do not let this timing thing mess up something that you like and enjoy that helps you hit your numbers. I cannot stress this enough. And then as far as the rest of your carbs go, really just eat them whenever you prefer. There is no real magic here, so space it out however you like with your remaining meals and snacks if you enjoy them. And then as far as your off days goes, the same thing pretty much applies. It's probably best to space them out as evenly as possible, but really however you like to eat is totally fine in that scenario. Quick note on fat timing, I'm not really going to do a video about that because it's pretty simple, so really just space it out however you want. I do think it's a good idea to avoid too much fat in your pre-workout meal just because it could cause some gastrointestinal stress, but it really doesn't make that big of a difference if it doesn't bother you. Some people will argue that you should avoid too much fat post-workout because it's going to slow down the process, but that really kind of goes back to what I was talking about before and isn't really that relevant. So don't worry about fat in your post-workout meal unless again it causes you an upset stomach or something like that. Now here's what I want you to do next. If you're looking to get shredded as easily as possible, make sure you check out this video and I will show you exactly how to do that.